Hello, I'm Joan. I'm a Canadian family physician who also works as a restorative medical educator, facilitator, and coach. I create spaces that rehumanize the work of healthcare. I'm creating this podcast to remind myself, as well as anyone else working in a helping profession, that when you are working and caring for your human patients, you are the other human in the room. Hey there, healthcare humans. Before we get into this week's episode, I want to let you know that one of my self-paced courses called Homecoming, which is a course that's about rest and embodiment. It's an introductory way of learning to deeper understand the concepts of embodiment, about how to feel like a human being in a human body through practicing rest. I want to let you know that that course is going to be on sale for 50% off for the entire month of June. There isn't a coupon code. All you have to do is click the link in the show notes below, or go to my website, look under courses, click on Homecoming, and you'll find the summer sale option there waiting for you. I'd love if you spent this summer inviting more rest into your life, because I think all of us in healthcare need to practice more rest. We're deeply socialized not to rest. And if you're looking for a supportive learning container that you can take at your own pace to explore the concept of rest through written as well as audio and visual podcasts and videos to help you understand the concepts of embodiment more, I would love if you would consider enrolling in that course and use it to have a beautiful summer of rest. Now, on with the episode. Hello, hello again, healthcare humans. um, I know I just said hello to you multiple times, but I want to say hello to you again because I wanted to introduce that this is the third part of a three-part series I've been doing on the podcast that I originally recorded all as one big long episode. So I'm adding this little blurb in, sitting on my couch as I edit this thing, just so that it doesn't feel disorienting when suddenly you're launched into a conversation you perhaps haven't listened to the first two parts or you've forgotten. So as a reminder, at this time in June was approximately the time that I started the podcast 2 years ago. And last year I did for the first time a year in review, where I broke down some of the things that had changed and had happened for me in my personal life, in my clinical life, and in my coaching and education business life. And I wanted to do it again. And so that's what I've done. This is called year 2 in review. And over the past couple of weeks, you've heard me talk about what are the new identities that I've held, as well as what identities had I already held, but now are holding in a different way or a deeper way. And the first week we talked about in my personal life. The second week we talked about in my clinical work as a family physician. And this week is all about this thing we're doing, you and I, me talking to you and you listening to a podcast, and all of this sort of public facing work, both the podcast itself as well as the coaching and speaking work that I've been doing, and the new identities I've grown into over this past year related to that, and just how much fun it's all been, really. And what you'll hear right at the end of this podcast is me run out of time before I had to go to a meeting. And I talk about how I wanted to read a poem. And so, really, it's like a time bendy Easter egg, because what I ended up doing is reading that poem at the end of last week's episode. So, if you're, listening to this one as the third part and you haven't listened to part 1 and part 2, go back to the beginning, just because chronological is fun, guys. But if you're curious about the poem, it's right at the end of part 2. I read it. I just recorded that before I recorded this one. So enjoy that poem back in time. And otherwise, yes, enjoy this last part. And as I say at the end of this podcast and throughout this whole series, the reason I'm sharing so much of my life with you is, first of all, to record it for myself, because it's very fun to have this record of what I was doing. It's like a journal, but for the world. But also, it's an invitation for you to consider what you might want to feel different, how you might want to view yourself differently a year from now. And especially in this space, which I created this podcast on a wing and a prayer. Is that the saying? I don't know. But I didn't have to do this podcast. I didn't have to open like a coaching and speaking business. I already had a full-time job. And so there's something about this whole branch of my life, which has just been this huge creative expression that didn't have to happen, other than the fact that something inside of me insisted it had to happen. And it's in some ways feels like the most authentic expression of who I am in some ways, and helps me be more authentic in my expression in my more what you'd call classically, family life, personal life, and clinical life. This whole piece of my world has been totally mind blowing and liberating. And I love sharing the behind the scenes of that with you. And that's what I'm going to do on this week's episode. So I hope you enjoy, and thank you if you've listened to all three. Thank you for following along with this. And I mean, if you've listened to any number of my podcasts, thank you so much for listening. It is so fun to know there are people out there that are listening and that are changing their own lives in part by hearing how I'm changing my life. That fills me with such delight. All right, on to this episode. So the last section is my restorative medical education world. So everything like doing this podcast, doing coaching, whether it's one-on-one or the group courses, all the speaking I've been doing. So that starting with speaking, that's definitely a new identity that I would not have thought I would be holding a year ago from now, which is that I am not only a workshop speaker, which I already was doing last year, but I am a keynote speaker. I had that opportunity to deliver a keynote to my home university for the Department of Family Medicine at their annual retreat. And I have already talked about it a bit, but it was just such a transformative experience. The work I did on myself, both to like build the presentation, but also like the self concept, the speaking of all that performance stuff I was talking about being a soloist, like this, some of that felt easy because I'd already done this work for like the keynote. Working with the somatic therapist of like being in my body while delivering this talk, and everything I did for that. And then it culminating in just like the most delicious, like connected experience where everyone in the room was like connecting with each other and connecting with me. And we were laughing and we were talking about hard things, but in a way that felt liberatory and wonderful. Like, I really want to keep doing that. So and if anyone wants me for keynotes, I've had some opportunities already come up and was like, I've just loved I love public speaking. Did I know that? No, I did not know that. I would not have guessed a few years ago. For sure, I would not have guessed. And in-person public speaking where they're like eyeballs are on you, I would have thought that was terrifying before. I remember like, in elementary school preparing for my like grade 4 speech and being like memorizing my cue cards. And now I just feel so different about public speaking and how it's really about just like connecting with people and just being myself and them, and that allows them to be themselves, and then we just like get to have a good time as we like learn hard, beautiful, liberatory things together. Like, there's nothing better than that. And so I've got to do that in like so many wonderful ways, that keynote being like such a wonderful one. Another one that ended up not panning out, but still felt wonderful to know was possible, was like the large workshop I was going to offer at a conference in Hawaii. That unfortunately that didn't end up. The logistics didn't work out, so I'm not actually going to Hawaii. But just knowing that that was a possibility still lives in my body. And it's like, hey, so anyone else anywhere lovely want to invite me to do a speech? I'm there. It's going to be a good time. It's just like so delightful. The other workshops that I've run and just like connecting with people there. Another thing that's like a first time thing, I said on this podcast last year, I want to do a retreat. And it's been so interesting how I both have and have not met that goal, in that I have not personally organized and run like a multi-day sleepover retreat where it's sort of just my thing, but I have done multiple retreats. So I've done talks at retreats, including the family medicine one, which was basically designed around like my podcast was a main subject matter that informed the design of the whole retreat. But I got to do it with other people. So I'm not like in the back planning the logistics of the hotel. So that was like fantastic. And then more recently, with two friends and colleagues who live close to me, who also really love personal development and mindfulness and the body, and they're also physicians, we planned what we called a mini retreat at this gorgeous space at Langdon Hall. If you know this area at all, it's in Cambridge where I live. It's this beautiful manor, hotel, spa, restaurant, very like high end. We planned a half day there, and we all talked about just like honoring our humanity in different ways, and it went so well. It had like faster selling out than anything I've ever offered before. It was incredible, the desire to come, and it was so exciting to have so many people want to be there. And it did sell out, which was like, wow, so exciting. Um, and it definitely then whet my appetite, like, okay, so we can do that in a small like afternoon based thing. So what would it look like? I'm thinking definitely watch this space coming in the fall. We're going to be doing, I want to do more things with them in particular, and maybe even an overnight thing. I actually, that is, I have a very specific vision of an overnight thing that will be more like quote unquote my thing coming next year. I'm not ready to fully talk about it yet, but I have a plan. And I now feel like I'm so glad the way I've been doing retreat experiences past year has taught me a lot. If I'd tried to do the retreat experience thing I'm thinking of doing next year, this year, I wouldn't have had those other experiences as sort of like stepping stones. And so it just feels like it's all meant to be in this beautiful way that I don't actually believe in fate, but I do love in like watching things unfold where you're like, well, obviously this is all inevitable and was exactly supposed to happen this way. And that's what I feel about all the speaking stuff I've been doing and just enjoying it so much. I've got to speak to some really cool audiences. I was at this like palliative care conference and got to speak there. I got to speak, I've done a number of workshops for the medical students, and that like very different audience, and finding ways to like get them chatting because they're, a little more shy, but like seeing things land with them and having that impact when they're just at the start of their careers, it's just been so delightful. And I love it so much. And I definitely want that to continue to be a core piece of how I offer my restorative medical education, is like, especially in person, is very fun. In person speaking, workshops, it just is so fun. So I have big dreams of continuing to do that for sure. Another new identity, I'd say the other new identity that I wanted to name is that I am a thought leader. And I'm trying to like, don't self-deprecate it. I'm giggling a little bit, but I am in a few ways. So one of the things that I did for myself to prepare me for that workshop, or sorry, the keynote speech, and some other things that I saw were coming, is I've been in this coaching program with someone that I deeply admire, and it was all about thought leadership. And so I've like, even just knowing that as a term and what it means, which is like, so you're a person that is trying to say new things in new ways that impact and shift the world around you. And like, that is what I'm trying to do. Definitely with this podcast is what I'm trying to do. And with the work I do, the coaching work, not because I know the ultimate good thoughts for everyone to think. It's not like that, but it's just like, more than that, it's more like, hey, you have good thoughts to think. You're a human. And like, just that whole concept that is, I see that it is creating ripple effects in ways that really freaks me out sometimes, but in an exciting way, definitely. And then so I was already like self-identifying, like I'm doing thought leadership, I'm practicing thought leadership. So what that could make me a thought leader as an identity. I've been invited to be on panels with like big organizations, and those have been very high impact. I've seen people like definitely talking about the capacity stuff has been really impactful, and I've seen how that's rippled out, and so many people like messaging me or finding me on Instagram and talking about that, and that's been so like, this is a way that I am helping to save healthcare. And I've said that, I don't know if I've ever said that on podcast, probably at some point. Like, that's a big reason I do this podcast, is it's how I think I'm not me personally the savior, but like, this is my contribution to saving what is important within the healthcare system. And the rest can just, hospice away, as I talked about with the hospice and modernity stuff. But like, I do want to own that is an active intention in what I'm doing. And I can't fully comprehend how it's actually happening. And another level at which it started actually happening is that a few months ago, I got this email from a very prominent, recognizable physician in Ontario where I live. And I was invited as a prominent thought leader. Like they literally use that terminology alongside others. So it's like, this is a summit for people in leadership and prominent thought leaders. And I don't have any leadership roles. So I'm like, I think I'm here as a thought leader. And we like met together and it was about to discuss like solutions for the crises in primary care, and very fascinating experience. And actually it's going to have some ongoing elements to it. I can tell that that setting isn't going to be the primary setting. That's not the only setting in which I can influence the system, which is kind of neat. Um, and it's very, very meaningful for me to be in that room and to be like, remember that we're all human beings in human bodies. Remember that we're all human beings in human bodies. And I have an intention to continue to grow me saying that, not in like a taking over the meeting way, but in a like it's actually very, it's been its own piece of self work to practice being authentic and myself in a space with people that hold a lot of power. Because I the first time I did notice some old patterns rising up, which makes sense. And so I'm glad I have other opportunities coming up to just continue to be me and to be a thought leader. That's what they've invited me to be there. So I'm excited to continue to do that and rep humanity. Not the only one repping humanity. It's not like everyone's not repping humanity in these rooms, but you know, there's a lot of forces, there's a lot of ideas, there's a lot of power and institutions. And you know, sometimes that creates different thought patterns than someone who doesn't have those sorts of power and institutional roles to hold. And so I'm happy to do that because I don't have those. And that feels nice. Not interested in those as well. No, thank you. Not politics. No, thank you. Not for me. So I'm a thought leader. There you go. That's a whole new identity I definitely was not thinking last year. A few others, and then I'm going to close this one out. I'm not splitting this to two. It's just going to be a big, long, yummy one. I'm just thinking to myself live about that. So one thing that I am, speaking of the meta thing that I'm doing right now, is I am a podcaster. And the ways in which, in particular this past year, like the first year I would hear about it mostly from people I already knew, but this year I've had more and more people come up to me, like I, you know, through the choir thing or at conferences or whatever, and they're like, I listen to the podcast. I love it so much. And like, that is so mind blowing to me. I've had people email and they're like, I've been listening to your episodes and it's like, you're the reason I'm still in medicine, which like isn't true because they're the reason they're still in medicine. But like the fact that listening to the podcast has been a major source of help and support and inspiration is like, oh, it's so exciting. And so it's something I still have to do self work about, like how to be sometimes. People come up and they're like, I'm a fan. I'm like, ah! But like I'm working on it, and it feels good. It really does feel so delightful to just have people interested in listening to the podcast and have the podcast have this impact on people. Is like that's what I was just saying. That's the goal of the podcast. And so that it's actually coming true and that people really are getting help from it is just such a joy. And I know it's not even just people in healthcare. It's definitely not just physicians, but I already knew that. Like I know lots of people in all sectors of healthcare have been listening and finding it helpful. And so I'm so glad that you're all here listening, and thank you for listening too. I know there's people here that aren't even technically in healthcare. I'm aware there's, I don't know if they're still listening, but at one point there was a group of teachers that were listening, and I love that because tons of overlap for sure. I know there are patients who listen, and so hello, if you're my patient and you're listening, hi, thanks for listening. That feels so delightful. And again, just speaking to what I was saying before about being a family physician leading from my humanity, like everything sort of intermingling. At first I was so nervous. I'm like, what will happen when my patients discover my social media and my podcast? And now I'm like, yes, I mean, the goal is to be my true self and full self everywhere I am. And so this is just a way of doing that. that people can consume on their own time and pace. That feels really delightful as well. And yeah, so thank you all for listening because I would be a podcaster whether you listen or not, I suppose. But I don't know if I would have if zero people listened to any of my podcasts, would I still be creating them 2 years later? Honestly, I'm not sure. Maybe. But I might have just tried a different medium by now. But the fact that there is like each episode within the first day, if not within certainly within the first week, there's like maybe between 100 and 200 people who like seem to be consistently listening. And that number, I know maybe there's other podcasts that would be like a failure of a number, but to me, I'm like, oh my gosh. And it's like every single one. So that's every week. And you guys are busy. So it's like the fact that, and it's okay if you don't listen to every single one, by the way. There's the fact that there's some consistency in people listening. And then there's some episodes like the one I did with Hillary McBride, which makes sense because she's like famous. Like it's almost got 1,000 listens. That's wild to me. That is so wild to me. And I love it so much. And it's so exciting. And it's thrilling. That's the word I was looking for. It's thrilling to know that people are really listening as I like look into my laptop with my little microphone. And I actually have a very strong intention and are actively moving through a plan to be a podcaster in more than one podcast. So, but this time next year, if all goes according to plan, which it may not, new plans may emerge, but this time next year, if things continue the way they're moving, I will be a multi-podcaster with a slightly different audience and with a co-host for that other podcast. And very excited about how all that's unfolding. And that might mean that I actually get like real podcasting equipment this year. So I know you've been listening to me on the various little microphone type of devices that I use, but I might get like the audio quality may change this next year. No promises, but again, that is the intention. If, financial resources continue to move themselves in the way I want. So if you want to support higher audio quality, how could you do it? Well, if you're interested in signing up for coaching stuff I'm coming up, you could do that. If you've been wondering about one of my courses, if you sign up for one of those, then that puts money into the bank account that helps, get the better audio quality. So there's ways you can support the podcast if you so wish. You also don't have to. That's why I like that it's free. Anyway, so I am going to grow my identity as a podcaster over this next year, if all goes according to plan, and that feels very exciting. And then, yeah, the last identity is sort of what I say at the beginning of this podcast each time. Like, I'm a creator of spaces to rehumanize healthcare. And so one big change I'm wanting to make around that in terms of what I offer personally, and especially to create space for the speaking stuff, for the podcast stuff, for the thought leadership stuff, I am going to be focusing down what I personally offer in terms of coaching to one program. I'm saying it for the first time here. It is, I've not settled on the name. It might be creating space, but it might be something slightly different. It's going to be about the capacity stuff because I've noticed how much that is exciting for people and really clicks and is a bit more tangible than some of the other stuff I've talked about in the past. And so it's going to be the way you can work with me if you want to do sort of like direct work with me, versus listening on a podcast or whatever, coming this fall at some point over in July. I think I have an intention in July to have specific invitations and the website and all of that and have the official name and all the details, but I'm just naming it here as sort of a little teaser preview. So I've actually already let my one-on-one clients know that I'm going to stop doing one-on-one work because this program is going to have a little bit of one-on-one as well as group work in it. Like I'm interested in having one coaching related container, and therefore that makes space for everything else, and it makes space within that container. And so I'm trying to continue to embody what I teach in ways that feel aligned to me, and this is what's feeling good, and I'm really excited about it. And it's actually within this container. Okay, I'm just going to tell you is this a bad idea? Because, okay, this is not, like, don't hold me to this. I'm just telling you my active idea as I'm creating it. So if it ends up different, listen to the later podcast. where it's different. But my dream is it will be a space in which, if you are interested in creating space in your life for your humanity, I think it's going to be 6-ish months. So it's going to be the longest program I've ever offered. The longest I've offered to date is 3 months. So like more time to sort of breathe. The whole thing, I wanted the whole program to have space in it to embody the thing that we're learning, right? Because that's what I'm doing here. So 6 months, starting in the fall, ending in the spring. There'll be like probably 2 or 3. There'll be like a workshop every month. There'll be coaching calls every month. There'll be one-on-ones, not like probably not every month, but like a certain number of one-on-ones with me that you can have throughout the 6-month container in a way that makes sense to you. I want it to at least end with an in-person retreat. So you kind of then get that in-person people that you've been working with online. You'll get to meet them and connect with them and sort of launch each other to whatever happens next. It's very similar to actually this thought leadership thing that I've just been in myself, that it was really a well-designed program in my opinion. So I want to do a version of that. But this container will be all about like how to honor your capacity and really taking the steps to do it. So taking the steps to figure out what you want to protect, what you need to pause or quit, what you need to do crappier, like the whole thing. So I wasn't really thinking I was going to actually say that all aloud, but I have. So there you go. Watch the space. It's not official yet. I guess if you're interested, you could email me and let me know, or DM me on Instagram if you're like, oh, okay, well, I want to make sure Joe knows I'd be interested in that, and I'll make sure I let you know first. Whatever. Like I'll let you know when it comes out to give you the option if you want to do it with me. But I will officially say all of that again on a future episode when it's all official, like the dates and stuff are all officially nailed down for people to register. But I actually really love doing that kind of, like, each program I've developed and each course I've developed, that's been really neat. Such deep learning for me and helpful to get feedback from people who are going through it. And I just am interested in continuing to iterate and find ways for its like really deep impact, because like the podcast is one way that you can really transform, but I want there to be something where you are feeling so held and so encouraged and so resourced that you can create change that might feel less possible on your own. Like that's what I really want inside of the coaching containers that I offer, whatever they are, because that's what I've experienced inside really effective coaching containers. So watch the space for that coming in the fall. Exciting. And the last thing I wanted to say, 2 last things. One is, I know I just listed a bunch of things I identify as, but at the end of the day, I'm actually only a human. The rest of these things that I've just described are roles that I play, ways of being that are fun to experience and play in. And it's fun to hold so many different roles. But at the end of the day, I'm Joan, sitting in my house. I'm in my human body. I could stop all of that tomorrow and I'd still be me. I'd still be worthy. It would still be a wonderful life. And so there's something really beautiful about holding an identity, but holding it loosely. And that's something else to offer you, because especially those of us in healthcare, our professional roles we can hold kind of tightly, you know? So actually that's it. I'm out of time. I got to go to a meeting. This took longer than I expected. I was going to read you a poem, but I'll just have to read you it another time. That's okay. Thanks for listening to this extra long episode. And I'm just sending so much love and delight and care and joy to every single person who listens to this and any of the podcasts. And I hope you know that you are magic. The invitation for you is to think through, what identities are you holding that you never thought you'd hold? And especially, are there any identities that it would be so wild and wonderful and delightful for you to start holding? And what if you worked on that this next year? Could that be kind of fun? Let's do it together. Who knows what the year 3 in review, what will it hold? I have no idea. Astronaut? Probably not. But like, something. All right. Take care. I'll talk to you next time. I would love to take this work deeper with you. Visit joanchanmd.com today and discover my growing menu of options for restorative medical education to suit your learning needs. I offer one-on-one coaching, customized workshops, and self-study courses that allow you to connect not only with my work on a deeper level, but also with other healthcare humans just like you. So, if you want to start humanizing your work in healthcare to a deeper level and do it in community with others, please visit joanchanmd.com and find those options and what fits you and your life today.